40 years ago, homeschooling was either illegal in some states, incorrectly prosecuted as illegal in many others, and strongly disfavored in the rest. We have seen the Lord's hand at work in big ways and small, in blue states and red, and in the hearts and minds of our neighbors, friends, and in many cases, our own families. But pendulums swing, first one way and then the other. Today, I'm giving a slimmed-down version of a longer speech entitled From Fringe to Movement to Enduring Institution. The enormous growth of homeschooling has occurred with the Lord's blessing and guidance, and it has succeeded because homeschoolers learned the habits of liberty. We must ask ourselves, where does our liberty to homeschool come from? If your answer is that liberty comes from the state or the elected officials we engage with every year, I want to suggest a different answer.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Hi, I'm Jim Mason, president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Today, I bring you good news and bad news. The good news is that homeschooling today is freer in America than it has ever been. Legal barriers continue to roll back as they did in Ohio and Vermont last year. The Lord continues to bless the efforts of all of us in ways that never cease to amaze me. Homeschooling is more socially acceptable than it has ever been as more and more homeschooled kids grow into responsible adults, take their place in society, and second and third generations begin homeschooling our grandchildren and in some cases, great-grandchildren. That the boundaries of freedom have expanded near to their outermost limits in America, with fewer and fewer states still embracing antiquated laws, is to be celebrated. There is still work to be done, but consider that 40 years ago, homeschooling was either illegal in some states, incorrectly prosecuted as illegal in many others, and strongly disfavored in the rest. We have seen the Lord's hand at work in big ways and small, in blue states and red, and in the hearts and minds of our neighbors, friends, and in many cases, our own families. But pendulums swing, first one way and then the other. Today, I'm giving a slimmed-down version of a longer speech entitled From Fringe to Movement to Enduring Institution. The enormous growth of homeschooling has occurred with the Lord's blessing and guidance, and it has succeeded because homeschoolers learned the habits of liberty. We must ask ourselves, where does our liberty to homeschool come from? If your answer is that liberty comes from the state or the elected officials we engage with every year, I want to suggest a different answer. HSLDA is a Christian organization founded by two Christian homeschooling dads, Mike Ferris and Mike Smith. HSLDA has always stood on the belief that the Bible gives parents the primary jurisdiction to raise, educate, and nurture children, and that the government restrictions that stand in the way of parents carrying out that high duty and obligation must give way. While HSLDA is motivated by our biblical worldview, we believe that all parents, whether they share our worldview or not, should enjoy the same liberty we wish to have for ourselves and our children. That foundation is where the habits of liberty begin. Now, we all know that homeschooling did not begin as a movement because of the top-down vision of a politician, nor was it dependent on government funding. Homeschooling began when a handful of moms and dads, just like you and me, said, enough. Amazingly, those first homeschoolers found each other long before Facebook groups were even a twinkle in Mark Zuckerberg's father's eye. Groping through the darkness without email, smartphones, or websites, prehistoric homeschoolers formed thousands of those quintessentially American things, private associations. You see, homeschoolers learned to look to each other rather than to the government to advance goals important to our families, our communities, our states, and our nation. The strength of the modern homeschooling movement has not come from reliance on the state. Our strength has been our reliance on the Lord and on each other. And historically, when homeschoolers have come to the legislature, it has mostly been to say, keep your hands off. We have not typically said, Please give us a hand out. In the early days of homeschooling, opponents argued that homeschooling could not provide proper academic instruction. And then they coyly asked the question that is all too familiar to homeschoolers. What about socialization? Those arguments against homeschooling have lost their traction as homeschooled children have thrived and taken their place as responsible citizens. But we must not grow complacent. Now the bad news. In March of 2020, a prominent Harvard law professor named Elizabeth Bartholet proudly published a law review article arguing that homeschooling is such a bad practice in America, carried out by such a bunch of backwards fundamentalist clods, that it should be presumptively banned. In what must be one of the best, or depending on your perspective, worst examples of bad timing, the Harvard Crimson magazine publicized the good professor's law review article just as public schools all across the land closed en masse because of COVID-19. In keeping with the times, the Crimson article went viral. For all the wrong reasons if you were Professor Bartholet, because suddenly the whole world was homeschooling, and nobody talked about banning it. While we can put the COVID Bartholet skirmish in the win column for the good guys, our ideological opponents have not left the field, and they aren't likely to as long as families choose to homeschool for religious reasons that are contrary to the values of large swaths of the prevailing culture. In a new wave of homeschool opposition post-COVID, in response to the enormous exodus from public schools, we are beginning to see more negative portrayals of homeschooling, especially Christian homeschooling, in well-written and highly produced popular publications. Late last year, the Washington Post published several front-page articles called Homeschool Nation, each of which cast modern homeschooling in a negative light and ended by calling for more regulation. And Prime famously streamed the docuseries A Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets. The scandal involving the Duggar family and Bill Gothard was over a decade old, yet the series had the biggest debut of any documentary series produced by Amazon Studios. And just last month, ProPublica published another negative article calling on Illinois, one of the freest states in America for homeschooling, to enact restrictions on homeschooling. Professor Bartholet was roundly criticized for her obvious stereotyping. But these new efforts post-COVID advanced the narrative by telling stories about real people rather than using a dusty old law review article that would have gone unnoticed but for the profile in the Harvard Crimson magazine. This new wave of opposition presents new challenges and appears to be animated by the exodus from public schools post-COVID. But here's why it can be seen as good news. The homeschooling movement has exercised the habits of liberty now for generations, and the Lord has blessed us with more success than we could have imagined, often in the face of daunting opposition. The sophistication of this new wave of opposition is evidence that we have largely succeeded. Which brings me to why I think the homeschooling movement may be better understood today as an enduring institution. In a recent book, Time to Build, American Enterprise Institute scholar Yuval Levin wrote, "While institutions come in a wide range of shapes and sizes, they share two distinct elements that, broadly speaking, may be said to unite them. That they are durable is essential. Homeschooling has proven to be durable in the face of opposition. Second, most important, each institution is a form of association. The institution organizes its people into a particular form, moved by a purpose, characterized by a structure, defined by an idea, and capable of certain functions. In other words, institutions are by their nature formative. Healthy institutions play a vital role in positively shaping the character of those they serve by encouraging and modeling virtue, which in turn encourages and models virtue to their communities. Could it be that with the Lord's guidance and care, we have already built a new institution? An institution built up around a community voluntarily associating together for a healthy purpose. An institution that can be used by Him to raise up generations who are not just liberated in the modern sense, but generations who are, in Levin's words, formed for freedom, given the tools of judgment and character to use that freedom responsibly and effectively. Christian homeschooling emerged organically, coalesced, organized, and after years of struggle, succeeded. Today, by God's grace, we are unquestionably a durable association, moved by a purpose, characterized by a structure, defined by an idea, and capable of offering real solutions to families of every tribe and tongue in our troubled times. Your state organization is one example of the durable institution that is homeschooling today. The organizers of your state organization do this out of love for your families and for your children. They also play a vital role throughout the year as helpers of the homeschool community and as guardians of liberty in each of your states. They have not forgotten the lessons of liberty. Please give them all the support you can. Each of you also plays a vital role. As we look to the Lord for wisdom and guidance, we also ask Him to use us to model virtue to our children, our families, and our communities, and to preserve and grow homeschooling as a positive, formative institution for our nation and around the world. We at HSLDA know that we could not provide legal assistance to homeschooling families without your support, as we did for Kirk and Kristen Sosby here in Virginia, where our office is located, not too long ago, when their school district threatened to prosecute them if they did not comply with extra legal demands. Before the school district could prosecute them, we sued and took the case all the way to the Supreme Court of Virginia. During oral argument, the Chief Justice clarified that the school district intended to report the Sosbys to CPS for educational neglect if the court upheld its local policy. He responded, "It sounds to me like it's not a child in need of services, it's a school board in need of paper." The Supreme Court of Virginia ruled unanimously in favor of the Sosbys, and we have used that published opinion to dissuade other school districts from foolishly going rogue. If you are a member of HSLDA, please accept my heartfelt thanks. If you are not a member, please consider joining. By taking on the responsibility to raise, nurture, and privately educate our children, by forming private associations, by looking to the Lord and to each other, and by assisting one family at a time, together we have grown from fringe to movement to enduring institution, and together we will serve and lead our nation, because we are stronger when we stand together.
Every week, HSLDA hears from hundreds of homeschool families, many of whom are facing hostility from school officials or discrimination from colleges and employers. We've helped single parents facing criminal charges for homeschooling their children, families traumatized by wrongful CPS investigations, and even a grandmother harassed by the state for homeschooling her granddaughter. By donating to HSLDA, you can help make homeschooling possible for families like these and enable our work to preserve freedom for future generations. Give today at hslda.org/donate. That's hslda.org/donate. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.